My name is Jessi La Main, and I'm going to be your worship associate today. Well, and going forward, hopefully. Spiritual practice. What does the word practice actually mean? Using it as a noun, it means the actual application or use of an idea, belief, or method as opposed to theories relating to it. For example, I practice a lovely blend of humanistic Unitarian Universalism, or we always try to practice kindness. Now, the verb definition reads, to perform an activity, exercise, or a skill repeatedly or regularly in order to improve or maintain one's proficiency. Kind of boring, right? Or in other words, to do something over and over until it becomes easier, more fluid, and more natural. This feels like the kind of spiritual practice I've been doing lately. Working my land has been my spiritual practice. A very dirty, messy, exhausting yet exhilarating spiritual practice. Breaking a sweat while tending to the buildings, plants, animals, infrastructure, general health, and well-being of our property, it fills me with inner peace. I know those things kind of seem opposite, but it absolutely does. It adds to my cup. Very much similar to Reverend Marcia's story. Walking up and down the hills, even filling in those holes that I trip over, makes me feel complete. Planting new plants into the ground and watering them fills me with that peace and joy that I certainly do not understand. Also, when I build something that fails, it doesn't work, or it breaks down, or you know how things go, I find my resilience while rebuilding and reimagining. Chicken coops, goat and sheep shelters, greenhouses, compost piles, and more. From frustration comes another innovation. From failure comes more lessons, and from all of that comes a resilient, I can do attitude. Also, taking a break and laying in the field, oftentimes in the company of a giant, fluffy, yet fierce guardian dog, or another animal, chickens, you name it, I'm filled with gratitude. Laying in the grass, feeling it sway in the wind against my limbs, I feel aware. My thoughts bring awareness to the present moment, away from all the webs I spin in my head about the things that don't belong, right? I'm grateful to the grass, I'm grateful to the universe, and I'm just grateful. Also, when performing routine care of my animals, like hoof trimming, brushing out coats, vaccinations, medicine, a boo-boo, more. I'm brought into a community that doesn't use words or English to communicate. This community is felt, seeing and feeling how the animals interact with one another and feel for what each other is going through. I even find community when one goat thinks they are protecting the other goat from me and my big bad hoof trimmers, and they will put their face right in the way, right? They demonstrate community when the thunder crashes and they flock to one designated safekeeper, or will all stand and eat in a circle, keeping an ear and eye out for each other's safety as well as their own. On our farm, with my feet on the ground and my hands deep into whatever project I'm working on, I find peace, connection, awareness, community, guidance, resilience, and gratitude. I'd planned to write about spiritual practice and how it transformed for me from a rigid, over-structured, over-planned devotional and prayer time towards a much healthier mix of practices. And while that is really important, what came out of my heart and mind was the in-the-moment spiritual practice. So I'll leave you with a short poem I wrote about spiritual practice. I wonder how many different spiritual practices there are. So many different people collected under the stars. I'm often perplexed as the universe works in its mystery. Animals seem to know what is and might tend to disagree. I am in awe of the awesome and giving thanks to Mother Nature, standing in a stream, wishing I could be braver. For the trees, the breeze, and the hills and the meadows, a symphony in the stars waiting to be composed. Being immersed in nature is spiritual practice to me. I will remain in wonder as the world around me continues to be. Thank you.
Our reading today is from the poet Mary Oliver. It's called The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated face. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Friday morning, I got up, dressed, and fed the animals, and then I slipped on my sneakers and headed out into the dawn. The sky was blue-gray and puffy clouds just tinted pink, and a bright half moon high overhead. As I started down the street in my neighborhood, I saw the sky start to glow yellow to the east and then erupt with golden light. Pretty soon, the clouds glowed bright pink as the crows began to fly from their roosts downtown out to my neighborhood and then points further east as they set up their daytime stations in trees and on telephone wires. I talked with a friend on the phone as I snapped photos of the sky, of the crows, of the giant white pumpkin that is growing in a tree 6 feet off the ground. I snapped photos of a shock of red leaves in a sea of green, of delicate Japanese maples, of a single red and yellow leaf on the ground. I stopped to greet neighbors, and especially their dogs. I picked rain-beaten dahlias planted outside the fence, especially so neighbors will take some home. The owners told me twice to pick them. Please pick them, they said. Some days it's dahlias, colorful leaves and pumpkins. Other mornings it's raindrops on the granary, or roses, or friendly neighborhood chickens. I talked to crow friends and dog friends and human maybe someday friends. I notice changes. I notice beauty. I move my body. This, in a nutshell, is my spiritual practice, being out in the world and noticing beauty. Some of you work the soil and tend a garden. Jessi and Donna tend their animals. As I wrote this, I'm listening to music, and my dog's soft breathing and my cats, Flora and Liam, are curled on my feet as I lay on the couch. It's all spiritual practice. Being present, paying attention to what is right in front of you, noticing beauty, savoring it, sharing it. Some religious traditions place a higher bar on spiritual practice. You have to sit in silence for minutes or for hours. You have to pray 5 times a day. You have to pray publicly. You have to pray privately. You have to read this one book. You have to let our people tell you what that book really says. And even though we sometimes feel like our way of doing things is morally superior because it gets us out of autopilot or doesn't rely on ancient ideas from 2,000 years ago, but the truth is, those practices wouldn't have lasted if a group of people didn't find them meaningful, didn't find that doing those particular things sharpened their senses, made them feel more alive, helped them through their own impossible times. An article by Andy Tix called 5 Spiritual Practices That Increase Well-Being, published in Psychology Today, notes that at least 5 spiritual practices have been shown by psychological research to actually make us feel better, to live healthier, more contented lives. Of the 5 that they listed, the first is meditation. And they said it's a lot less important how you meditate than just the action of focusing your thoughts on something. A word, a mantra, your own breath, what you hear outside, the movement of light across the floor. Meditation can be focusing on any one thing as best you can for a while. The second practice is awe. This is the one that I tend to go to naturally. Researcher Dasher Keltner defines awe as the feeling we get when we're in the presence of a vast mystery that transcends our understanding of the world. The article suggests that you go on an awe walk, which sounds exactly like what I do naturally. Walk somewhere and focus on things that are beautiful. Things that make you feel big, or things that make you feel small, or things that just make you feel grateful for the beauty around you. The third practice they mentioned is forgiveness. And they note that you don't actually have to tell the person that you forgive them. That's not part of the practice. You just have to let go. I had an experience once with this. Someone had done me wrong, and I had the hardest time letting go of it. I was so angry that her actions meant that we didn't have something we needed. And eventually I realized that my hanging on to this didn't affect her at all. It was just hurting me. You ever heard the phrase, holding a grudge is like taking rat poison and expecting somebody else to die? I had this conscious feeling that holding on to this was only hurting me, and I needed to let it go. I can tell you exactly where I was driving down Hawthorne when I did that. I can't say I never think of it. It is still my go-to example of forgiveness, apparently. But I'm not suffering about it anymore. Compassion is the fourth practice. Loving kindness meditations are a great way to build that muscle. Start with somebody you love or really care about, and with them in mind, say or chant or sing or just think, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. And then extend that to yourself. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. And then try it with someone you feel neutral about. Your letter carrier, the grocery clerk. And finally, and this is the stretch, try it with somebody you don't like at all. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. The nice thing is that those wishes translate fairly well. You can take somebody you really don't like and imagine them filled with loving kindness, and maybe they'd be a more likable person. And the final practice is gratitude. Find something to say thank you for. Start a practice of writing appreciative notes, or finding 3 things every day to be thankful for and saying those at the end, or writing them down at the end of the day, or writing them down in a journal. And the reason that this is important is that noticing things to be grateful for gets us into a practice of spending more time focusing on the positive than focusing on the negative. I bet that on your way here, 99% of the cars just let you drive along. They stayed in their own lanes. Nobody hit you. Let's spend more time thinking about that than the one jerk who cut you off. It'll make you feel better. And finally, the article notes that all of these activities can be practiced alone, but that they have more impact when practiced as part of a shared community. As some Quakers like to say, the article says, we each bring a light, but when we come together, that light shines brighter. Spiritual practices help, but sometimes I think the biggest help is being part of a shared community and practicing those things together. Because after food and shelter, community is the biggest indication of health and longevity. We are a social species. We need healthy community and relationships in order to thrive. I spoke last week about my experience at a silent Unitarian Universalist retreat this summer, and how I felt such joy at doing so many spiritual practices, from reading spiritual memoirs, to walking a labyrinth, to group prayer, to qigong, to going for long walks. But one of the most enjoyable practices for me, and one that I don't do often enough in my normal life, is making art. Some of the leaders brought collage supplies, photos pre-cut from calendars or books or magazines, and magazines to cut words and pictures from, scissors and paper of all sizes and glue sticks. Channel your inner 5-year-old. I had the best time finding images that spoke to me, nature scenes, birds, animals, people hugging each other, or dancing, or looking content, mamas and babies, dancing teenagers. So many ways to be beautiful and feel in touch with the wonder of life. I was so happy with my collage. I brought it home. It's hanging upstairs in my house now. The rich blues and oranges, the fire of autumn light, the richness of skin tones, and the glow of happy faces. But also, before I left, Deese gave me a tiny little watercolor set and a little pad of watercolor paper to paint on, and I made bad art. There is something so satisfying about making bad art. It is hard to be bad at something as an adult, and especially as an adult whose job or vocation or very existence is based on being fairly competent at whatever it is that you are doing. The assumption of competence means that we don't often do things that we don't do well. And perfectionism means that we take fewer and fewer chances. And without taking chances, we don't discover what we might be good at. Who knows? You might be a fabulous piano player. So I invite you into a spiritual practice of not expecting perfection, to risk being bad at something. Take up a new instrument. Take a language class. Make bad art. See the absolute joy that can come with not having to excel at everything the first time you try it. When my younger daughter, Marcella, was 4, we went to a Unitarian Universalist regional assembly, and there was a children's program so the adults could go to the conference and the workshops. I went to pick her up at the appointed time, and the leader, who was a woman that I know well, shared how they'd been painting, and she told Marcella that she liked her picture. Well, I am an artist, my 4-year-old told her. She got an entire sermon out of that. We lose that confidence that we have as kids, and it's a loss. We lose that sense of joy and fun and confidence and think we have to be good at everything, when sometimes the joy is in the practice. There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground, 1,000 ways to be home again, as Rumi tells us from our opening words. One of our new core Unitarian Universalist values is pluralism, and it definitely shows up here. There are so many ways to have a spiritual practice. Yours doesn't have to look anything like mine. It doesn't have to look like anyone else's. It just has to bring you present to this particular moment that you are in. And it can be a spiritual practice. I will always remember my dad telling me that he just couldn't feel God in a church on Sunday morning. But he could feel him on a boat out on the bay. For my dad, fishing is the closest that he gets to that feeling of awe and wonder and connection with the universe. A friend told me that her Uncle Bob also wasn't a church-going guy. He was a Vietnam vet, she told me, but he believed in sacred spaces. He lived in Colorado, and when he had a problem too big to handle alone, he'd ride his Harley out to Monument Park in Colorado, and he'd go sit on the rocks and think. He told me to find my own sacred space, and then if I couldn't, I could just call him. Sacred spaces. People we trust. Communities of care. Finding gratitude and awe and wonder. Risking being bad at something and continuing to do it anyway, because how else are we going to get better? I don't know exactly what a prayer is, Mary Oliver writes. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down in the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? My friends, pay attention. Be idle and blessed. Your one wild and precious life is right here and right now, and you are living it. Live it with intention and practice. Live it with awe and wonder and gratitude. Blessed be, and amen.